What you are about to hear is a story that nobody inside Buckingham Palace wanted to come out. A story that started with a question from a 6-year-old boy. A question so simple and so honest, and so completely without agenda that it cut through 6 years of broken things and palace politics and family silence and landed in the one place that no institutional machinery could protect. The heart of a man who had forgotten, somewhere along the way, that he was an uncle. Hello, friends. My name is James, and you are watching Royal Daily Report, your number one source for the most exclusive and most emotional royal stories on the internet. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because tonight we are telling a story that every person who has ever watched a family struggle with distance and pride and the things that go unsaid for too long will feel in their bones. And if you have been with us from the beginning, you already know. We never hold back. We never pull back. Let us get into it. And right now, before we say another word, if you are not subscribed to Royal Daily Report, you are missing the most exclusive royal coverage anywhere on the internet. Hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on those notifications. Because this story is developing every single day, and the follow-up coverage we have coming will change everything you think you know about this family. Subscribe now. Let us get into it. Prince William is 43 years old. He is the Prince of Wales, the future King of England. The man who will one day sit on the throne that his grandmother sat on for 70 years and that his father sits on now. He has 3 children of his own: George, Charlotte, Louis. He knows what it is to be a father, to hold a child and feel the specific, terrifying, overwhelming love of a parent. To watch a child grow and change and become themselves day by day in ways that are simultaneously ordinary and miraculous. He knows all of that. And he has 2 nephews and nieces he barely knows: Archie and Lilibet, the children of the brother he has not properly spoken to in years. The children who live 5,000 miles away in California. The children whose names he knows and whose photographs he has seen and who he has thought about more than he has ever admitted publicly. The children who have grown up in the gap between 2 brothers and who, until this week, had never properly met their uncle. Subscribe to Royal Daily Report right now, because the story of how that meeting happened, who arranged it, what was said, and the moment that our source describes as the most unexpected and most moving thing they have witnessed in years of covering this family, is coming right now. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. You cannot miss this. Subscribe now. The meeting was not planned. That is the first thing our source wants the world to understand. It was not arranged by intermediaries or brokered by the quiet third party who has been facilitating so many of the significant moments in this family recently. It was not the result of weeks of careful negotiation between Harry's team and William's team and palace officials managing the optics of a reconciliation that both sides needed to get exactly right. It happened because of something that nobody planned and nobody could have planned. Because of something that a 6-year-old boy said on a Tuesday afternoon, without any awareness of the weight of what he was saying. With the beautiful, complete oblivion of a child who does not yet know that some questions are complicated, who does not yet understand that some names carry history and hurt and 6 years of broken things inside them, who simply wanted to know something and asked. The way children ask, directly, without ceremony, without fear. Archie was sitting with Harry. Our source says it was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in Montecito. The kind of afternoon that Archie's life is full of. Homework done. Dinner not yet started. The particular in-between time of a weekday afternoon when a child and a parent are simply together in the comfortable, ordinary quiet of a shared life. And Archie was looking at something. A book. A photograph. Our source is not certain exactly what prompted the question, but believes it may have been a photograph. One of the photographs that exists in the Sussex household of Harry and William together. From before. From the years when 2 brothers were simply brothers and the world had not yet intervened between them. And Archie looked at the photograph. And he looked at his father. And he asked, "Dad, where is my Uncle William? Why don't I know him?" Our source says Harry did not speak immediately. Did not have an answer ready. Because there is no answer ready for that question. There is no version of that question that has a clean answer. That has a response a parent can give a 6-year-old that is honest and age-appropriate, and does not carry inside it all the weight of everything that is not age-appropriate. Harry sat with the question for a moment, and then he said, "Uncle William lives in England." And Archie said, "I know that. But why don't I know him? George and Charlotte and Louis know him. Why don't I?" And Harry said, "That is a really good question, Archie." And Archie said, "So what is the answer?" And Harry said, "The answer is that grown-ups sometimes make things more complicated than they need to be." And Archie considered this for a moment with the serious, concentrated attention he brings to important things. And then he said, "Can you make it less complicated?" And Harry said, "I am going to try." Subscribe to Royal Daily Report right now, because what Harry did after that conversation with Archie, the phone call he made, what William said when he heard about Archie's question, and the moment that changed everything, is all coming next. Subscribe now. Hit that button. Turn on those notifications. Share this video right now with someone who needs to hear this story. Subscribe now. Harry called William that same evening. Not through advisors. Not with a scheduled call arranged in advance, with both sides preparing talking points and managing expectations. Harry picked up his phone and called his brother directly. Our source says William answered on the third ring. And the first thing Harry said was not hello. Was not a careful opening designed to establish the right tone. Harry said, "Archie asked me today why he does not know his Uncle William." And there was a silence on William's end of the call. A long silence. The kind that happens when someone has been reached by something they were not prepared to be reached by. And then William said, "What did you tell him?" And Harry said, "I told him that grown-ups make things more complicated than they need to be." And William said, "That is accurate." And Harry said, "He asked me to make it less complicated." And William said, "He is 6 years old." And Harry said, "I know. And he is right." Another silence. And then William said something that Harry did not expect. Did not expect at all. William said, "I think about them. I think about Archie and Lilibet more than you probably know. I see photographs sometimes. In the papers. And I look at them and I think, I do not know that boy. I do not know that little girl. And they are my brother's children. And I do not know them. And I have not known how to fix that without fixing everything else at the same time. And fixing everything else at the same time has felt impossible." And Harry said, "What if we do not fix everything else at the same time? What if we just fix this? Just this one thing. The children knowing their uncle. Can we fix just that?" And William said, "Yes. I think we can fix just that." Our source says the call lasted 40 minutes. And by the end of it, something had been decided. Not about the larger relationship. Not about the years of broken things, or the memoir, or the interviews, or the legal cases, or the institutional complexities that still exist between these two men. None of that was resolved on that call. None of it was even fully discussed. What was decided was something much smaller and much more important. A date, a time, a place, where William would meet Archie and Lilibet. Just that. Without everything else attached. Without the weight of 6 years being present in the room. Just an uncle. And 2 children who had never properly known him. Meeting. Finally. If you are watching Royal Daily Report for the first time tonight, you have found the channel that goes deeper than anywhere else on the internet. My name is James, and we are here every single week with the stories that matter. Subscribe right now. Hit that button. Turn on those notifications. Tell everyone you know. Because the next part of this story, what Meghan said when Harry told her about the call, how the meeting was arranged, and what happened when William walked through that door and saw Archie for the first time, is the most extraordinary thing we have ever covered. Subscribe now. Meghan's response when Harry told her about the call and what had been decided was not complicated. Our source says Harry came to find her after the call ended, found her in the kitchen, and he told her everything. The conversation with Archie, the call with William, what William had said about thinking about the children, about not knowing them, about not knowing how to fix just this without fixing everything else, and what Harry and William had decided. And Meghan listened to all of it. And when Harry finished, she was quiet for a moment. And then she said, "Archie did that. A 6-year-old boy with one question did what 6 years of everything else could not do." And Harry said, "Yes." And Meghan said, "We are raising remarkable children." And Harry said, "We are." And Meghan said, "When is William coming?" And Harry said, 2 weeks. And Meghan said, "Good." And then she said something that our source considers the most significant thing in this entire story. She said, "I want to be there. Not to manage it. Not to supervise it. I want to be there because I want William to see that I am not the obstacle he has thought I was. That I never was. That I want my children to know their family. All of their family. And I want him to see that from me directly. Not through Harry. From me." And Harry looked at his wife. This woman who had every reason to say no. Who had been through everything she had been through with this family and with this institution. And who was saying yes? For her children. Because of her children. Because a 6-year-old boy had asked one question, and she was not going to let the answer be complicated for one more day. And Harry said, I will tell him you will be there. And Meghan said, good. The meeting took place at a private location. Not a palace. Not anywhere with royal associations or institutional weight. A private house, arranged by the same quiet intermediary who has been present at so many of the significant moments in this family's recent history. Our source was not inside the building, but they have spoken to someone who was present from the moment William arrived to the moment he left. And what that person described is a story that our source says they will be telling for the rest of their life. William arrived first. He was early. Our source says William is almost never early to anything that involves emotional complexity. Is someone who manages his timing carefully, who arrives at the moment that gives him the least amount of waiting, the least amount of time alone with his own feelings before the thing happens. But he was early for this. Was there 10 minutes before Harry and Meghan and the children arrived? And he stood in the room alone for those 10 minutes. Our source says the person who was in the building described William in those 10 minutes as someone they had never seen before. Not the composed William. Not the institutional William. Not the future king managing his public image. Just a man, standing in a room, waiting to meet his nephew and niece. Nervous. Genuinely, visibly, completely nervous. In the way that people are nervous when something matters more than they have let themselves admit. And then the door opened, and Archie came in first, and he stopped when he saw William. And William stopped when he saw Archie. And they looked at each other. A future king and a 6-year-old boy. And Archie said, Are you Uncle William? And William said, Yes, I am. And Archie said, I asked Dad about you. And William said, I know. He told me. And Archie said, I am glad he called you. And William said, I am glad he called me too. And Archie said, You look like Dad, but taller. And William laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere genuine. And he said, People say that. And Archie said, Is it weird being tall? And William said, Sometimes. And Archie said, Dad says it is useful for reaching things. And William said, Your father is correct. It is very useful for reaching things. And Archie said, Can you reach the high shelves? And William said, Every single one. And Archie said, We need someone like you at our house. And William laughed again. And our source says the person who witnessed this exchange had to look away for a moment. Because what was happening in that room, what this 6-year-old boy was doing to a future king with questions about height and shelves, was the most purely human thing that had happened in that family in years. And it was happening because Archie did not know it was significant, was just being himself, talking to his uncle the way he talks to everyone, with complete openness, with the fearless curiosity of a child who has been raised to believe that every person is worth knowing. Subscribe to Royal Daily Report right now because what happened when Lilibet came into the room, what she did when she saw William, what William said that made everyone in the building stop breathing, and the conversation between William and Meghan that our source describes as the most important conversation in this family in 6 years, is all coming right now. Subscribe. Hit that button. Turn on those notifications. You have to be here for this. Subscribe now. Lilibet came in holding Meghan's hand. 4 years old, with her great-grandmother's eyes, reading the room the way she always reads rooms, taking in William with those eyes. Not anxious, not shy, just assessing. The way Lilibet assesses everything, with the focused attention of a child who understands more than she lets on. And William looked at Lilibet. And our source says what happened on William's face when he saw Lilibet is something that the person in that room will never be able to fully describe. Because it was the face of a man encountering something he was not prepared for, not emotionally prepared for. Because Lilibet looks like her great-grandmother, has those eyes. And William, who grew up with Queen Elizabeth, who knew her, who loved her, who still carries her loss in ways that show sometimes in unguarded moments, looked at this 4-year-old girl with his grandmother's eyes and felt something that had no name and no institutional context and no appropriate response. He just felt it, and it showed. And Lilibet looked at him for a long moment. And then she said, You have sad eyes. And the room went completely silent. And William said, Do I? And Lilibet said, Yes, but nice sad, not bad sad. And William said, What is the difference? And Lilibet said, Bad sad is when you do not want to feel better. Nice sad is when you do. And William looked at this 4-year-old girl who had just said something that most adults spend their whole lives trying to articulate. And he said, "I want to feel better." And Lilibet said, "Good." And she let go of Meghan's hand. And she walked across the room. And she took William's hand instead. And she said, "Come and see what Archie found. He found something in the garden, and it is very important." And William looked at Meghan over Lilibet's head. And Meghan was looking back at him. And something passed between them in that look that our source says the person in the room has spent days trying to describe. Not forgiveness exactly. Not an apology. Something beyond both of those things. Something that said, "We are here. Both of us. For these children. And that is enough for right now. That is everything for right now." And William nodded. And Lilibet pulled him toward the garden. And he went. William spent 4 hours with Archie and Lilibet. For hours in which, according to our source, he was not the future king, was not the institutional William, was not the man managing his public image or calculating the optics of reconciliation. He was just Uncle William, who got down on the ground in the garden to look at the important thing Archie had found, which turned out to be a particularly interesting beetle, who let Lilibet tell him at length about her opinions on various topics, including the correct way to make toast and the question of whether purple is better than blue, which Lilibet has apparently strong feelings about, who played a game that Archie invented on the spot, whose rules changed every few minutes in the way that games invented by 6-year-olds always do, who laughed more in 4 hours than our source says they have seen William laugh in years, who at one point was sitting on the floor with both children climbing on him in the completely unself-conscious way that children climb on adults they have decided to trust, and who looked, in those moments, like someone who had put down something very heavy, like someone who had been carrying the weight of 6 years of broken things, and who had, for 4 hours, put it down and simply been present, simply been an uncle, in the way that uncles are supposed to be. Harry watched all of it, mostly from a distance, giving William and the children the space to find each other. But our source says there were moments when Harry and William were near each other. Small moments. A shared look when Archie said something funny. A moment when they both reached for the same thing to help Lilibet, and their hands were close and neither of them moved away. A moment when William said something quietly to Harry, too quietly for anyone else to hear, and Harry nodded. And our source does not know what was said, but they know what it looked like. It looked like two brothers, simply being brothers, for a moment, in the way they used to be, before everything intervened. The conversation between William and Meghan happened near the end of the visit, privately, in a corner of the room while Harry was with the children. Our source does not have a full account of what was said. What they know is that the conversation lasted approximately 15 minutes, that both William and Meghan spoke, that neither of them raised their voice, that at one point Meghan said something that made William look at the floor for a moment before looking back up, and that at the end of the conversation William said something to Meghan that our source was told about by the person in the building who was close enough to hear. William said, "I am sorry it took this long." And Meghan said, "It took as long as it took." And William said, "I want to do better. By them. By Archie and Lilibet. I want to be their uncle. Properly." And Meghan said, "Then be their uncle. Properly. That is all they need from you. That is all I need from you. Just show up." And William said, "I will show up." And Meghan said, "Good." And that was it. No grand gestures. No dramatic reconciliation. No moment designed for cameras or coverage or the machinery of royal image management. Just two people, in a corner, saying true things to each other. For the first time. When William left, he said goodbye to Archie and Lilibet in the way that people say goodbye when they are not sure when they will see each other again, but are certain that they will. Not a farewell goodbye. A see you soon goodbye. Archie made him promise to come back. Made him promise properly. Shook his hand on it, the way Harry had taught him, with the seriousness of a child who understands that a handshake is a commitment. And William shook Archie's hand and made the promise. And Lilibet said, "When you come back, can you bring George and Charlotte and Louis?" And William said, "I think that can be arranged." And Lilibet said, "Good, because I have a lot to tell Charlotte about purple." And William laughed and said, "I will warn her." And Lilibet said, "Do not warn her. I want it to be a surprise." And William said, "Your secret is safe with me." And Lilibet looked at him with those eyes and said, "I know." And William walked out of the building and sat in his car for several minutes before his driver pulled away. Just sat. With 4 hours of Archie and Lilibet and the garden and the beetle and the game with the changing rules and Lilibet's hand in his leading him somewhere important. With Meghan's words, just show up. With his brother's face when they had that moment of simply being brothers. With everything. Sitting with all of it in a car outside a private house in England on an afternoon that started because a 6-year-old boy asked one question. Where is my Uncle William? Why don't I know him? Our source said one final thing before they ended our conversation tonight. They said, I have covered this family for a long time. Have watched the breaks and the distances and the legal disputes and the institutional decisions and everything that has happened between Harry and William and the palace and Meghan and all of it. And I want to say something that I have not been able to say until tonight. I am hopeful. For the first time in 6 years, I am genuinely hopeful. Not because the big things are fixed. They are not fixed. There is still so much that is broken and so much that needs to be said and so much that will take years to properly repair. But because of a 6-year-old boy who asked a question, and an uncle who showed up, and a 4-year-old girl with her great-grandmother's eyes who took a future king's hand and led him into a garden to look at a beetle. And because in that garden for 4 hours something was true that has not been true for 6 years. This family, broken and complicated and painful and still finding its way back to itself, was together, just together, without agendas, without institutions, without the weight of everything, just together. And that matters, more than anything else. That matters. That is all for tonight, friends. I am James, and this has been Royal Daily Report. If this story moved you the way it moved us tonight, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you have not already, and turn on those notifications because the follow-up to this story is coming very soon. What happened in the days after William's visit? What George and Charlotte and Louis have been told? And what is being planned for the months ahead that our source says will be the most significant royal family moment since the coronation? Subscribe now. Turn on those notifications. Share this with everyone you know tonight. With every person who has family they have not called. With every person who knows what it means to miss someone who should not be a stranger. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and stay royal. Goodbye, friends.